We will desperately need you to produce the show out there. Comments, questions are needed. Not a whole lot to talk about this week concerning Ohio State football. Big Ten championship game, National Signing Day with the number 1 or 2 recruited class in the country. All right, we're Buckeyes Live. It's Tony Gerdeman from Buckeyes Scoop. It's Steve Hellwagon below me from 247 Sports Bucknuts. And, of course, Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove. Did you guys survive yesterday? Of course you did. You're breathing. You're ready for another hour here. Everybody good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. We're getting nods of the head.
We're doing good. We're doing good.
Steve, we're going to start with you. Not much negative to talk about concerning a recruited class that is historic in Ohio State annals. We will see how it, of course, plays out on the field. But in terms of any nuances, what stood out to you on not necessarily yesterday, but with the entire class?
Well, again, these are extraordinary times with the pandemic. So what they had to do from March on was recruit this class virtually with online visits and online and FaceTime conversations. And it was that just requires a lot of trust that what we're telling you and what we're showing you is the real thing. And there were several cases of guys who never made an official or unofficial visit even to Ohio State. Maybe they came by on their own. There was a weekend that some of the recruits put together their own visit, basically, and maybe toured the campus on their own and watched a game on television together or that type of thing. So to me, that's the extraordinary thing about it, is that in this backdrop, they've always had top 10, top 5 classes when everybody was doing it the conventional way. But now you had this backdrop against which you had to make some extraordinary accommodations to get this done. And they're still number 1, number 2, whatever the number is going to shake out. I think ultimately, if they're able to add the player from Washington, JT Tuimoloau, or however it's pronounced, Tuimoloau, defensive lineman from Washington, national top 10 prospect. I don't have it written down. That could swing them the number 1 class. He may not sign now till February, though. So a couple other guys that are kind of still trending out there, kind of looking around. But he's kind of the big fish that's still out there. And they got a lot of big fish in this class anyway. 12 of the national top 100. The rest of the Big Ten got 8. So as I tweeted out, my line from the Truman Show, more Big Ten lopsided games coming straight ahead. So there you go.
We want to make a programming announcement. This is a late change update that following this hour, we'll be doing a full hour on the 2022 class with Kevin Noon. All right, Kevin, rewind back to 2021. What you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great class, and the Rivals.com rankings, Ohio State's number 2. Alabama had a couple of flips in a little back and forth that they had going with LSU that expanded their lead. As Steve had mentioned, if Ohio State's able to go into Washington State and land a talented defensive lineman, that I'm not going to offend any of our Polynesian viewers by tripping over his name. Another name to keep an eye on is linebacker Rajon Davis, who's out of Mater Dei, out of Southern California, who's committed to LSU. Ohio State's still in on him at this point, as he's not signed yet. But, this class really checks off all the boxes. And, we can get into waving our corporate banners, whether it be Rivals or 24/7 or anybody else that does rankings. But when Ryan Day was asked about it yesterday on his call, he said that this was the best possible class for Ohio State. And ultimately, those are the rankings that matter. Do classes work out 100%? No, they don't. I mean, and that's what the transfer portal's for and things along those natures. But this class is really good for Ohio State. I mean, really strong from top to bottom. Checks off a lot of boxes. I mean, we could really kind of get in and say, it would be great if they had another offensive lineman. If Tristan Lee out of Fairfax, Virginia, looks like he's probably going to Oklahoma, LSU, and Florida are in there too. Ohio State's not been eliminated yet. But, I think they're just a hat on the table with him. they're positions that we could really kind of get into a little bit of a discussion about. That'd be great if they had another body. But when you look at bringing in another top quarterback, having another great receiver class with the late announcement and addition of Emeka Egbuka, a couple of running backs, some linebackers, some defensive backs. They really checked off everything that they needed to, and a stellar class for Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni and the rest of the staff.
And I'll just throw a couple things out here. I know a lot of people expected, or Buckeye fans thought this would end up being the top class in the nation based on all of the 5 stars they were getting and just the way things were going. And of course, 24/7 rivals, they love to throw up, boost up those Alabama commits, you guys, Stephen, Kevin.
Bama bump.
Get that Bama bump and then drop Ohio State commits, Stephen, Kevin. So just, I think Ohio State's class is pretty good. I know rivals and 24/7 don't like them for whatever reason, Stephen, Kevin. But it was interesting talking to Ryan Day on Wednesday about exhibiting, showing the culture of Ohio State when players can't visit and how they have to basically do it through group texts from the commits and they do a lot of the work for the coaches. And it was impressive to be able to land Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor, 2 of the top running backs in the nation. Henderson maybe the top running back in the nation. And the fact that those 2 became really close friends in those texts. They play Madden all the time together. They want to play together. And I think it's anytime you can get 2 of the top running backs in the nation to come in wanting to work together and compete against each other and make each other better, that's pretty interesting. It's a testament to the way they were recruited. As Ohio State running backs coach Tony Alford told everyone from the outset, we're taking 2, and they were okay with that. Evan Pryor, okay coming in with the number 1 running back in the nation, and number 1 running back coming in okay sharing with the possibility of sharing carries. And so it's a positive move towards them fitting into the culture, which is also Ryan Day said a lot, as Kevin alluded to. It's about finding the best players that fit the Ohio State culture. And I think he said, first, they have to be talented enough to play at Ohio State. Then second, they have to fit. And it's good when the really talented players then fit that culture.
Steve mentioned off the top the ability for Ohio State to adjust virtually. Now, everybody's had to do that across the country. You would think in a sense that Ohio State would be, there's a disadvantage for everyone. Now, to what degree, it would vary to a certain extent, but it's basically a level playing field of barriers because of the inability to build relationships face to face. But you would think Ohio State would benefit from brand, popularity, all those things in just throwing out the name Ohio State. And if there's a tie to be broken, that it might lean their way because of that. But going back to the virtual side of things, we're talking about a bunch of football coaches. This isn't their expertise. Just to be able to, they must have brought in some other people to, is there any insight into what Ryan Day revealed in terms of why they were so good in this environment to recruit?
Well, I'll start. It's not just the coaches that are doing this. It's Mark Pantoni, the director of recruiting, in his department, that you don't even see all of the social media guys, the scouting guys, the guys the video people who put stuff together that are able to catch the eye and build a brand, because that was something that we talked to Pantoni as well yesterday. And he was saying what you're saying, Mark, the brand of Ohio State does a lot of the work. And certainly it's not like recruits are unaware of Ohio State if they can't visit. They know all about it. It's just they can't actually step foot in Ohio Stadium during a game or on campus with the coaches and stuff like that. But the brand is there, and that's not just the coaches that you see. It's the guys you don't see that live in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center 24/7 almost.
Yeah, Ohio State's done a great job with its creative team in terms of videos and graphics and everything else. It's all of it. You can have the Brian Hartlines and the Tony Alfords and obviously the Ryan Days of the world say all the right things and get on the Zoom calls and do the tours and whatnot. But, part of the, Ohio State's very proud of talking about the amount of impressions they get in terms of socials and things along those lines. So I think you're going to see a lot of lessons that are going to carry forward from this 2020, year of 2020, but class of 2021, moving forward in future classes, because Ryan Day did kind of mention something along the lines of, things that you're able to do in lieu of maybe some of these unofficial visits or whatever. And it is getting tougher and tougher at times for when you have such a wide recruiting footprint. And Ohio State may make its bones in Ohio and within a 3-hour footprint or anything like that. But Ohio State recruits nationally. So it's not easy for these West Coast guys, or even guys from Texas sometimes, to play a game on Friday, jump on a plane on their own dime, come out to Ohio State for, to watch a game and eat pizza, which is essentially an unofficial visit. So I think that Ohio State and some of your halves in terms of the recruiting world learned a lot of lessons, and I think it's going to further divide what's going on between this small group of halves and everybody else, until everybody else hires away at least, the number twos in these departments to show them the path of how to do that. And then they're still at a disadvantage because they are not selling Ohio State or Alabama or UGA or some of these types of schools.
Yeah, I think it's a product that almost sells itself at this point. When you have 50 guys strewn across the National Football League and guys who are in prime positions, like Nick and Joey Bosa and Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas, guys who are at the head of the class at their position in the NFL. And then you have an offense with Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins prior to him that just puts up huge numbers. This is the second year in a row they've got the number one wide receiver, Julian Fleming last year, Mecca Abuka this year, and they got the number one running back this year with Travion Henderson out of the Mid-Atlantic area. Also got Evan Pryor, another outstanding running back as well. Both of them national top 100 players. That's almost unheard of, to get two national top 100 running backs in the same class. So there was a lot to like here. One of the top offensive linemen in the country in Donovan Jackson, one of the top defensive ends in the country in Jack Sawyer. So a lot of star power across the board. They filled position needs, took 6 guys in the secondary, 3 safeties and 3 corners, because they really needed to restock both positions. They are skeleton thin on the field right now with what they can put out there. So they needed bodies as much as they needed star power. They did get 2 national top 100 cornerbacks in this class who, maybe they're the next Wade or Okuda, but remains to be seen on that. So a lot out there, and obviously didn't even touch on the quarterback position. You get another national top 50, top 25 quarterback after taking one last year with C.J. Stroud, in addition to taking Jack Miller in that class as well. You have 3 talented quarterbacks who will be in the fold for spring football in April and March, looking to replace Justin Fields. So I think it's the rich just keep getting richer is how I view this situation.
We'll, of course, continue with the recruiting conversation, but mingle this in with the Big Ten championship game against Northwestern, going to the comments in the comments section to get started on some of these questions. We can go clockwise. Let's go clockwise on this one, starting with Tony. Ryan D. Will a defensive player, I didn't want you guys to have to think, sorry. Ryan D., will a defensive player have a monster game? And if so, who?
A monster game against the Northwestern offense. I think Northwestern's offense is such that Ohio State's defense evenly, like everybody could have just good games because they'll spread it around. And I don't know that one guy is going to shine above the other, because it's all a pretty solid defense against an offense that doesn't really do much of anything. So I think they have a true freshman left tackle. So if I'm going to pick somebody, how about Tyreek Smith, who is starting to come on a little bit, defensive end, junior defensive end out of Cleveland?
Yeah, I agree with Tony that Northwestern's had enough offense outside of game one to where it's done just enough to win games. They haven't broken 30 since game one. Don't take the fool's gold or fall for the banana in the tailpipe trick that they're going to run for 414 or whatever like they did against Illinois. It's an offense that does just enough. I don't know if you're not necessarily going against a team that's going to put up a lot of resistance. It's it's kind of like in baseball. If you go up and throw up a 48-mile-an-hour eephus pitch, I don't care how hard you swing, it's not going to go. You're not going to sit there and hit it 450. So I think if I had to pick a player, I'm going to say Shaun Wade, just because I think that Northwestern's going to have to recognize that the best opportunity is going to be having Peyton Ramsey out there throwing, and he's a sub 60% completion guy. And I think that this is an opportunity for Shaun Wade to go out there and maybe add to his argument against some of the critics that have been kind of critical, as critics are, of his game this year.
Kevin has half the chat running to Google search trying to spell eephus.
Yeah.
Steve.
I would agree. I think you guys brought up a couple good ones that have been trending upward. Tyreek Smith starting to play a little bit more, make a little bit more of an impact there off the edge. And Shaun Wade, I think the pick six helped get him going, and had an interception of kind of what do we call that when a guy lays out like that? A diving interception, I guess, against Michigan State. If I had to pick one, maybe I'll go with the linebacker group, and maybe a Baron Browning or a Werner or a Borland creates a fumble against maybe one of these freshman running backs at a critical time. They had two freshmen that rushed for 100 yards in their game last week against Illinois, who neither one of whom had played much. I think Pat Fitzgerald, kind of tired of watching his offense sputter, put some other guys in the game to see what they could do, and lo and behold, those guys could play. So, but you put them into a primetime situation like this, it can be kind of a tough situation for a young guy. So maybe one of those linebackers will spark something here with a turnover and change the momentum of the game, and that would be big. I think we're looking at a great matchup. Ohio State's very, very powerful offense against Northwestern's defense, which statistically is very good against the run. And I think they're number one passing efficiency defense, which means they don't give up big plays, haven't given up a lot of touchdown passes, and have intercepted some passes. So to me, that's the matchup that's going to be worth the price of admission, or I guess there's not going to be many people paying a price of admission for this game. At any rate, worth your time to tune in and watch is how Fields is going to attack, soften up that defense, and eventually take advantage of some creases and find some things, and have a typical Ohio State offensive game. It doesn't matter what kind of defense you throw at this offense from Ohio State. Usually they get their yards, they get their points one way or the other.
Fortunately for us, Dominic, I believe, watches 5 or listens to 5 different podcasts because, noting here, I like Ohio State. They are my 5th favorite team in college football. So we just make it under the wire, I believe. Ohio State Buckeyes live every Wednesday, typically, but National Signing Day was yesterday, so these 3 made the excuse that they were actually busy, and so we had to push it off to Thursday. So here we are. Maybe with a few different folks in attendance today. So leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics for us, and I'll leave one out there. There's no way for this team to miss the playoffs if they win on Saturday, right? They're number 4. So the committee, regardless of what the arguments are about the lack of games being played, the committee's already said they're number 4. So that hurdle's already been cleared because they've had the 3, the 4, the 5 games played, and the committee's already said you're number 4. So now how can a Texas A&M, let's say at number 5, that's playing a hapless Tennessee team with 3 wins, or even number 6 Iowa State, who I don't know how they continue to be elevated, number 6 Iowa State playing Oklahoma, how could they supersede Ohio State, Tony, at number 4?
I don't know, because you've got an Ohio State that is a conference champion. Then if Notre Dame and Clemson both stay in, however, and Alabama stays in, like, the only way I could see Ohio State being dropped out is with Florida winning, and so they would be in at 4. Alabama would be somewhere like 3, and Clemson and Notre Dame would be 1 and 2 in some form or fashion. And it's hard for me to see that, but also I can't put anything past the committee when it comes to the SEC. Even a 2-loss Florida SEC champ, they like those SEC champs. They like those SEC runner-ups. And a 1-loss Alabama team, I don't think, is going to miss the playoffs. So do they leave Florida out? Can Notre Dame or Clemson be left out for Ohio State? I think it's a really slim chance that Ohio State doesn't make it, but I'm not going to trust the committee to not put 2 SEC teams in here ahead of an undefeated Ohio State team. I do think if Notre Dame loses, that obviously hurts them. A close loss may hurt Ohio State, but once you start comparing teams, that conference championship has to come into play as a tiebreaker, and there's going to be 2 or 3 teams that won't have that, and Ohio State will.
Steve, I'm rooting for Alabama for the mere sake that I want to keep this to 1 team per conference. Otherwise, the guy that wants chaos in me, that is 99% of me, and if I was not an Ohio State fan, I'd be rooting for Northwestern as the 20-point underdog that could give the committee hey, we're 7-1 Big Ten champs. I don't care that we were number 14 last week. Don't we deserve some consideration? But the mess that would be Florida winning. Florida's a 2-loss SEC champ. They just beat the consensus number 1 team that's still going to stay in the top 4. And then you got Texas A&M that can say, we've got it on Florida in 2 ways. We only have 1 loss, and we beat them. So you got 3 teams for them to consider out of the SEC if the Gators win.
Yeah, you make a good point there. I don't think Florida is in this discussion at all because to my knowledge, they've never put a team that's lost to a team with a losing record into the playoff. And Ohio State, obviously had the disqualifier with the Purdue loss a few years ago. Just different things happen. I just am of a mind that they're not going to be considered. And I don't think there's any scenario where they beat Alabama. And you can obviously use my words against me next week if it turns out Florida wins the game 31-30 or something stupid. But I don't see a scenario where Florida wins this game. Alabama has been on a rampage down the stretch, and what they've done has been nothing short of impressive, I think, on the whole. So I can't see it, but again, stranger things have happened, I suppose. If you're rooting for only 1 team per conference, then you're probably also rooting for Notre Dame, because I think a second loss would rule Clemson out as well, and then that would open the door for Iowa State, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, somebody else to kind of sneak their foot in there. I think a lot of it's going to be determined, as crazy it is, on how well you play your game on Saturday. That's going to be the lasting final impression. You have a team like Cincinnati that hasn't played since November the 28th, and we don't know how they're going to play against Tulsa. I mean, it's a complete unknown. So, if you come out and make a statement and win your game on Saturday by 30 points and can beat your chest and say, we are one of the top 4 teams, you just saw us kill them, then that may go a long way. I mean, Iowa State goes out and blows out Oklahoma. Would it be crazy to rule out and not only that, the run that they've been on, at that point it would be like 7 of their last 8 games they won or whatever it would be. So it would be a tremendous run for them. It isn't just something where they kind of fluked their way into it. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how it all unfolds. I personally think the Clemson Notre Dame game is going to be a close game. The Alabama game, that line of 17, we've seen so many of these stupid, I call them CBS championship games, SEC championship games on CBS, that one team just demolishes the other in the second half, and just scores touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and wins the game by like 25 or 30 points when it was, man, it looked like a nut cruncher, but then the other team just lines up and just starts running over them and just powers over them, and it's just one after another. So my guess is that could happen with Alabama. As I said, no one's played them to single digits. Ole Miss 15-point game is the closest game they've played, and they have beaten most everybody by 20 and 30 points here down the stretch.
That was a legitimately close game. It was tied with about 5-6 minutes left, something like that, against Ole Miss, 48-all. Before we cut Kevin loose, I just wanted to verify with Google, but I came up with your team, Steve. Michigan State 2015 lost to Nebraska 6-7.
Okay.
5-7 in the regular season.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be your one team.
And they redeemed themselves by beating the number one team on the road. So I guess that would be Florida would redeem themselves if they beat the number one team in the championship game, I guess. But I don't see a groundswell to put them back into this, though. I mean,
just wait until Gary Danielson starts on Saturday.
Well, Florida's got to be one of the top four teams, yeah.
Well, I want
thank you so much for the super chat
and talk on the ACC game, because if anybody saw the movie Kingsman and saw the scene in the church with Freebird playing, that's what Clemson is going to do to Notre Dame. They're going to assassinate them. It is not going to be close. They will assassinate Notre Dame. It is so it's going to create some chaos. It's going to be bad. And I'm going to say right now, if we've gone through all of this mess to get two SEC and two ACC teams in, it's not going to end. It's not going to end well in terms of the rest of the college football world. You know what? Sorry to the group of five. Sorry you're in the group of five. That's not going to change. But if you have a situation where you've had all these other conferences go through a lot of isolation and whatnot, and you're only going to open this up to two conferences, that is going to accelerate either change or dissolution of the college football playoff. I don't care how much money's involved. It's just too big of a mess at that situation. Hell, Florida could lose and still move up. I mean, if they only move down for their pathetic loss to LSU, I mean, who knows? I mean, if they lose to a good team, we know quality losses mean more than quality wins. So, I mean, they might move up by default. But honestly, to get back, I guess, to the main question, if Ohio State wins by 1 point, by 101 points, Ohio State is in, unless there is a situation to where Ohio State is unable to field a team on January 1st. Ohio State is in with a win, any sort of win, not a doubt in my mind.
Now, Kevin, despite the disparaging remarks concerning the Northwestern offense, what is the way in which the Wildcats can win this game? Because they are going to play, and it's only a 20-point spread. When I say only, I mean that there are underdogs that win by greater point spreads against them. There is a formula there for Northwestern to win this game. Ohio State hasn't been that invincible.
No, I think that it's going to be a situation of where, I can make the smart aleck comment and say, well, if they can sit there and get and resurrect a Michael Penix situation and whatever, but I don't think that Peyton Ramsey is going to have the weapons around him to recapture. And I have it right here. In 2018, he was 26 of 49 for 322 and 3 touchdowns against Ohio State. That was the 2018 defense, the one that everybody has issue with. Exactly. So he's tasted success against Ohio State before. He just doesn't have the weapons around him, in my opinion, to be able to do that. So Ohio State's going to have to help him out. Ohio State's going to have to play fast and loose with the ball, turn it over a lot. I think it's going to be a case of where Northwestern is going to have to figure out how to run the ball, keep Ohio State's offense off the field, and just kind of take the air out of the ball a little bit. I mean, Ohio State what is their time of possession? So they talked about on the Ryan Day radio show, it's like 36 minutes a game or whatever. That's crazy for the type of offense that, you sit there and from a top line, from a macro level, look at Ohio State running. So that one was for you, Gerd. But Ohio State's going to have to be something like -3, -4, and Northwestern can intercept the ball. Going into this year, I said, well, Justin Fields doesn't throw picks. Well, Justin Fields threw 3 of them against Indiana. I think they have the secondary to make some sort of pressure for that, but I don't see them being a great blitzing team. And I think that's the other component there. And with this being Mike Hankwitz's swan song, I don't think he's going to wait to sit there and have this final game to try and reinvent the wheel and suddenly turn Northwestern into this blitz-happy team. So I think it's really going to take a case of Ohio State turning the ball over, handing it to them, giving them short fields, and just playing about a D- type of game.
To David Greenshield's point right here, he's looking at 2 things. So he's going defensive line both in the recruiting cycle of 21, but also for Saturday night. So he's wondering if Zach Harrison's going to get more snaps. He's made plays when he gets the chance.
I mean, he was second team All Big Ten selection, but they rotate so many guys, and there's only so many snaps to go around. I think everybody wants to see him get more, and when he's in, he does do some things, but it's just not how it goes. Unless you're Chase Young, you rotate, and so I think that's just something everybody has to make friends with and make peace with it. And next year, when they have Jack Sawyer in there, he's going to rotate in there and get some snaps. I would agree that everybody wants to see Zach Harrison get snaps, because when he's out there, the potential that he has, and he has this label as being the next guy in line. But, it's Larry Johnson knows better than we do. I think we should go ahead and put that out there. And he's always talking about he doesn't want to put players in situations that they can't handle. And I don't think it's that, but it has been odd at times how Zach Harrison will sit for odd periods of time. And sometimes he'll start, and other times you won't see him until the second quarter, or he only gets one drive. And yet nobody ever says there's anything wrong. It's just part of the game plan. And so we'll see what this game plan has. Maybe he's better against mobile quarterbacks, or maybe he's better against pocket passers, and other guys are better against vice versa. And it's been interesting to watch what little we've gotten to see of him, and I think we all want to see more. But I don't know that he's going to play anymore just because of the rotation. I think it would take injuries, and I think they might be relatively healthy right now at defensive end.
Yakov 22 says that no one from Northwestern would make the Ohio State too deep. I'm thinking Peyton Ramsey's the backup quarterback, and I'm thinking their linebackers, Gallagher and Bergen and Fisher are vying for starting spots, and their corners are good. Their secondary is good. So I'll go to those 3 units.
Ohio State doesn't really have a too deep secondary, so anybody from Northwestern is going to get into that too deep.
Yep, they've got some guys that can play. I mean, one of the DBs has 5 interceptions, I believe. So they're, as we said, one of the top teams in passing efficiency defense. Again, we've seen teams come into this game with great defensive rankings, and Ohio State just tramples them. So that 59-0 game kind of sticks out. I think Wisconsin had the number 1 defense or number 1 rush defense or something, and Ohio State just obliterated them. Michigan's come into the game with a lot of good defensive rankings in recent years. A full 11-game body of work, and Ohio State just wadded it up and threw it away in one 3-hour football game. So they thought they were something, and it turns out they weren't. So, that could be the case again on Saturday. I think as my belief is Ohio State's going to try and establish the run first and get Fields going, kind of ease him into it. But then it's going to be, all systems go at some point. And they're going to hit a couple big plays, I think, in the course of this game, one way or the other. And I just think that Ohio State's just got too many weapons for just about anybody. I think even if they get into these playoffs, they're going to find themselves in shootouts, and it's going to come down to whether or not Ohio State's defense can get that critical stop at the right juncture, kind of like that Cleveland-Baltimore game the other night, where Cleveland just simply, under penalty of death, could not get the critical stop it needed about 6 different times. So I don't know, just that's kind of how I view that. That's not going to be the case this week, though. I don't think Northwestern has the ability on offense to exploit everything that might be wrong with the Ohio State defense. Certainly, they're not going to line up and run the ball against Ohio State with any great effectiveness. And Ramsey had better players around him, I think, at Indiana in terms of receivers, at least, when he was throwing for those big numbers a couple of years ago at Indiana. So, I think they'll get a couple touchdowns, but I have a hard time viewing Northwestern getting much more than that.
I mean, we talk about their past defensive numbers, which are very good, but we need to look at who they played. And the Big Ten has been pretty poor. And when you sit there and you look at the passing offense of the 7 teams that Northwestern has played, 4 of them are in the bottom 30 nationally. The bottom 30, with Illinois going in averaging 157.6 yards per game in the air. Now, when you're playing anywhere from 5 to 8 games or whatever, you definitely have a smaller sample size than you have in terms of other conferences. But it just shows that they've not really played any quarterbacks that have had a pulse. They've only faced one top 20 passing offense, and that's Purdue, who's 17th. And as I look there, Purdue was 28 of 51 for 263, 2 touchdowns, and wasn't picked off. Now, Purdue certainly has some other issues. They can't run the ball. The Boilers can't run the ball. They rushed for 2 yards in that game, 2. So that's part of the reason why Purdue fell 27-20 in a game that Purdue had lots of opportunities in that game to at least tie it and send it to more mind-numbingly awful football. But, I look at Northwestern and I'm like, they've done some nice things in terms of their pass defense, but they've gone against a couple of tomato cans.
Yeah, and they'll allow people to throw the ball and complete passes. They just don't expect you to be able to do it down the field. But Justin Fields can, so...
Yeah, there's no question it's a mismatch. I was just looking for an angle to get Northwestern to win because stranger things have happened, to use the old cliche. And that Purdue team, not great at quarterback with either Plummer or O'Connell at the time, but their wide receiver core is really good. And they were at full strength there, at least at the wide receiver core. But that's what you load up when you play Purdue, because Sander Horvath should not be a lead running back. And yeah, they can't run the ball. All right, let's go back to this signing class. So as we need to do, well, we don't need to do this, but it makes the conversation a little bit more interesting when perfection is near the standard and actually the result, as it is with this recruiting class. Can we poke holes in anything? Because I guess the one thing I'll say about what Ryan Day has done similar to Urban Meyer, besides, recruit his tail off, is basically locks up the class. And then you do see some of these other powers, a la Alabama, go out there and steal a guy or two on the final day. And we don't see that out of Ohio State. We don't see that late run for a guy or two as a flip on the final day.
It is interesting how that happens in the SEC a lot and not so much in the Big Ten. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, they had somebody that picked Ohio State last year on signing day. I don't remember who that was. Maybe was it C.J. Stroud? Maybe or
Stroud, yeah.
And he was a late addition, I think. The only thing I would poke a hole at this class is you're losing 4 senior linebackers: Tuff Borland, Baron Browning, Pete Werner, Justin Hilliard, and you're adding 1 player, Reed Carrico. Now I know they have 2 linebackers committed for next year already, Gabe Powers and Dasan McCullough. So that kind of mitigates that a little bit. But, if there'd been another impact linebacker, I think, in this class, and by impact, I don't want to say anything too disparaging about Borland, Werner, whoever, but they're good players. But Ohio State really has not had that All-American kind of linebacker in a while. And that's the guy that would really help, I think, if they had that type of player. So that'd be the one thing. I mean, Reed Carrico's a national top 100 player, and maybe he'll be better than Borland or Werner. But, I'd really like to see him get like a national top 20 linebacker one of these years and plug him in there. I think Browning was probably in that deal a few years ago. But I'd like to see that kind of player plugged in there. I just see a lot of kind of journeyman type guys and 3-star guys here as I look across the board, and maybe 4-star, borderline 4-star guys. I'd like to see, give me a 5-star linebacker one of these years. I'd kind of like to see that.
They have them in 22. Did you mention C.J. Hicks? I mean, C.J. Hicks, they're probably going to land Sean Murphy. So they're stacked in 22, but that's
I look at Hicks though more as a safety. He seems like doesn't have the size maybe to play linebacker.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that who slides up and who slides down and everything else. And we like at Rivals, we have Jalen Johnson listed as a linebacker, but honestly, I mean, he's kind of that hybrid linebacker safety type or whatever. The bullet. We want to use that term. Has that been banned? Are we not
Remember
that term anymore? But I would sit there and say, and I know when Steve mentioned it and I mentioned it, I'm sure Gerd mentioned at some point, waiting on a defensive lineman out of Washington State for a February announcement potentially. I don't know if they had the numbers on the defensive line. I mean, obviously Jack Sawyer, incredible player. I mean, he is fantastic. And then you have a couple of defensive tackles with Michael Hall and Tyleek Williams. But, as we're sitting there and we're talking about and answering questions about Ohio State and its rotation, there isn't a Bosa or Young right now currently on the roster who has at least risen to that level. We all think that Zach Harrison has the motor and has the potential, but he hasn't necessarily been able to get out of that 28 to 32 snap world that everybody else is in at this point. Jack Sawyer is kind of, and I've heard somebody from one of the other networks call him the third Bosa brother, and I agree with that term right there. But I would have liked to have seen Ohio State maybe connect on another defensive lineman as well, in addition to the pursuit of JT, which certainly is not a stone cold lock by any stretch of the imagination.
Especially because there may not be that speed rusher, pass rusher that they're going to get in 22. It would be nice to add another one. But, in terms of what Steve was saying, 5-star linebackers, I think Ohio State has had better success with 3- and 4-star linebackers than 5-star linebackers over the last dozen years. You go to Dorian Bell, Etienne Sabino, Mike Mitchell, Curtis Grant, even Baron Browning finally having a good year as a senior. But yeah, there hasn't been. Who was the last Ohio State All-American linebacker? Was it James Laurinaitis? I mean, is that how far we have to go back to, like 2008 to get an All-American in there?
Shazier did.
Yeah, right. Shazier was. Yes, he was.
McMillan was he?
He was the second team twice. McMillan was second team twice, but yeah, Shazier clearly, the guy I forgot, one of the best Buckeye linebackers of all time, certainly underrated. In terms of this class, you get 2 defensive tackles. They still need to rebuild that interior defensive line with elite prospects rather than guys who are lower ranked or moving over from defensive end or even moving from tight end possibly. You just need some more natural defensive tackles. But I think the guys that they did get are good. Losing J.C. Latham, though, to me is the one big miss in this 5-star offensive lineman, offensive tackle. Maybe the one true tackle that they could have gotten in this class, and he's, I think, the number 2 player in the composite, ended up at Alabama because of the quarantine, the shutdown at IMG, and he was leaning towards Ohio State until he went home and I think lived with his mom, and then he became a Bama lean and eventually signed with Alabama. And that was a miss that it may not hurt them if last year's class pans out, or the 2019 class, which had I think 6 offensive linemen in it, but there are also maybe some Ohio reaches in there where you hope over time they blossom and develop. But yeah, that for me, just losing. If Latham is in this class, then it's hard for me to pick it apart. Other than the fact that there may be like 1.5 linebackers, like Steve said.
We've got 150 on the line. Hopefully, people are smashing the like button. As a number of people, I appreciate everybody who jumps in the live chat and says, "Hey, hit the like button on your way in, your way out." NCIS Fanatic 21, smash the like button. In addition to that, keep in mind that we come here every week, and we got 3 professionals online. They give us at least an hour, plus all the other things that go into getting prepared for the show and the communications and so forth. So we would appreciate your contributions out there. This audio, video / podcast will stay alive based on your individual contributions. And also, if you have ideas, suggestions, legitimate ideas and suggestions. So I always have to hesitate somewhat when I give out my email account, as I often do, because then I get questions about Purdue's pass defense and Maryland's offensive line. No, please contact me if you have a legitimate suggestion or contact concerning a sponsor for this fine show, because that's the way we're going to keep this thing going and be able to do this in a fair and professional way, is to compensate and acknowledge the contribution here. Definitely. So the individual contributions from you and a sponsorship will keep this thing going. So we would appreciate that. There's a number of comments both here on the chat and also just in general online concerning Chris Olave. So I will ask the question this way: when do we find out the active or inactive list for Saturday's game? Do we know? Is there a
they told us early in the week it would be Friday at 10 a.m., but it's probably going to be Saturday at 11 o'clock, just like it was for the Michigan State game. So, they're probably not going to want to give away that information any earlier than they have to. A lot of rumors about, a handful of guys that may have tested positive for COVID. Jeff Snook, who's an author, put it on Facebook that at least one prominent offensive player will miss the game, and maybe a few other players as well. The good news is most of the guys you would think who missed the Michigan State game, including 3 starting offensive linemen, should be back. Their 21-day period would have run out, you would think, by now. So, it's going to be what it's going to be. And, they showed at Michigan State, other than if you took Justin Fields out of the mix, they've got the people that can get it done at basically every other position. So they can make it work one way or the other. And I'm not too worried about it. I haven't heard Justin Fields' name yet, so that's good.
Ditto.
Do we have any official word on why the game time was changed? So we've got a Big Ten championship game not being played at 8 o'clock Eastern time for the first time in its history.
I asked Fox, Valerie Todrick Krebs is their spokesperson for Fox Sports, and she used to work for the Big Ten, so she's kind of been around this scene for the last 10 or 15 years, and I just emailed her and I said, why are they not playing this in prime time like it normally is? And she said, well, as you know, at Fox, our preferred window has become the noon game. And with the big noon Fox lead-in show, whatever, which I find to be kind of comical that you would turn your back on prime time when the entire West Coast could actually watch the game, as opposed to when they're getting out of bed at 9 a.m. But it is Saturday, though, so, people aren't at least going to work. But I don't know. I think they got into the noon thing for the regular season because it was such a crowded house at 3:30 and 8 o'clock to put a good game in there. It was getting diluted. The ratings were getting diluted, and they hit a couple home runs with some noon games and decided to brand that as their thing. I also believe there's some cooperation between the networks, because I think it doesn't make any sense to program a game up against another great game. And I think the SEC game has typically been a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock game, and this year it's at 8 o'clock with Alabama and Florida, which was shaping up to be a huge game until this past week. And then, the Notre Dame Clemson game kind of fits in perfectly at 4 o'clock. That ACC game has floated to whatever position ABC has decided it needs to be in a given year, sometimes at night, sometimes 3:30, 4 o'clock, whatever. I don't know if they've ever played it at noon. The Big 12 game, I think last year was at noon and is at noon again this year. The stakes for it aren't all that high. So I think Fox kind of looked at it and said, well, if this is how it's going to be with the other networks, this really gives college football fans a great triple header of action, even if they're not on any one channel for 3 straight games. And there's some other good games. As we said, the Big 12 game could be an interesting game to at least watch and see who wins. And I think there's some intrigue with the American game at 8 o'clock. If the SEC game gets out of control, people may switch over and watch Cincinnati and Tulsa, because Cincinnati's only hasn't played since like November the 28th. Are they going to come out and blow Tulsa out? They're like a 2-touchdown favorite, but I don't even know how that's possible. So I know they played good football down the stretch when they were still playing. But that's my understanding of what happened. Fox is standing behind this. Well, as you know, noon is our preferred window now. And I'm like, when you get double or triple the audience at 8 o'clock, I don't know, whatever.
It's been the preferred window for 2 or 3 years now, and they haven't changed.
Yeah, but not for that game, which makes it kind of unbelievable. But
Steve, here's your scenario for the Big 12. Alabama wins, Notre Dame wins, Ohio State wins.
Yeah.
Big 12 champion.
Yeah.
USC doesn't get the respect. Texas A&M gets factor in.
Texas A&M gets into a 17-14 slogfest with Tennessee, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. We've seen it. They love their slogfests. So,
I'd rather watch Brees Hall than Kellen Mond, let me tell you.
I would also say they made that change to noon when there was questions about whether Ohio State could even play in the game. And so I would assume, like, if the Big Ten didn't change the rule, then Ohio State would be playing in primetime anyway. At that point, they just put, whomever they're playing, throw Ohio State into primetime and watch them get better ratings than the Fox Big Ten championship game at noon.
Yakov 22, thank you so much for the super chat contribution right there. Citing Danny Cannell on Saturday radio, I don't necessarily think this is a revolutionary thought that to win the college football championship, you have to have a first-round quarterback. Yes, the quarterback position has been magnified considerably in the last 15 years based on the way the game's played and the times the ball is put in the air. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? If you can...
we just saw what Ohio State did it in 2014 without a first-round quarterback. Has the game changed that much since then?
And Jay Coker won it in 15.
So, I think it's nice to have these guys who are the top 1, 2, 3 picks in the draft, and it helps. But I think you can still do it with a guy who's just really, really good. I don't see – that's – I think that's a benefit and a bonus. I don't think it's a necessity.
No, and BYU has a first-round quarterback, and they're not even going to sniff this game. And but it's nice to have that guy. I think it's a much more pleasing product to watch. But I don't think it's a necessity. I think that it's a situation that, it's what you're able to do as a complete team on both sides of the ball and everything else. You could have David Klingler out there who can throw it all over the field or whatever. And if you have the Houston defense, you're not doing squat.
Well, I think the point is not that there aren't first-round quarterbacks out there losing 3 and 4 games for other teams, but to win it, do you need a first-round quarterback? And I think we're getting to that range where that position's become – I hate that it's gone in that direction, but I do think that the game's changed even in the last 5 or 6 years.
I think there's a correlation causation thing. It's the top teams are getting the best quarterbacks. So then the top teams are winning, and it's not because of it's not like the quarterbacks are taking them to the top to the national championship. It's more like they are talented, but then also the rest of the team is talented, and so they win a national championship because of all the talent. And I think Alabama, I think Ohio State, I think Clemson could take a second round quarterback to a national title, without too much argument.
Is Mac Jones a first-round quarterback if he doesn't have Devonta Smith? If he didn't have Jalen Waddle earlier in the year or whatever? I mean, if he had, I don't know, if he had Michigan State's wide receivers, is he a first-round quarterback? I mean, so as Tony said, it is a causation and everything else there. So, it's an interesting point, and I do agree with Mark to a certain extent that that is the way that the game is getting to. But I don't think that. If you make the 4-team field and you don't have a first-round quarterback, or you don't even have a top 2-round quarterback, that you're necessarily drawing dead at that point. I think that, the fact that you got there shows that you're pretty darn special, and I think that as long as you play your game, anything can happen.
And when I say first round, go ahead, Tony.
So even if you have a first-round quarterback, a lot of that is it's not like those guys are successful in the NFL once they get there. They might be successful early on, like Jameis, but it doesn't last very long. So are they elite quarterbacks in college? Yes. In NFL, I think, sometimes GMs fall in love with guys.
Yeah, I'm not taking that topic verbatim. Either that quarterback is so good in college that he's a first rounder in the NFL, but then maybe he turns out to be a bust, or that quarterback has the potential to be a really good NFL quarterback. For whatever reason, he's taken in the 4th round, but then he does turn out to be a good NFL quarterback. Just having a player at that position that has the ability to play at that level.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right. At noon Eastern time on Saturday, we've got the Big Ten Championship starting out our day with the Big 12 playing at the same time. So let's go to our predictions.
I'll start.
Okay.
I wrote my prediction before any talk came out about a second COVID run or whatever. And I'm all about consistency, so I'll run with the prediction I wrote, though I'm going to back off of the score a little bit. As I said, Ohio State gets into the playoff with a win of one. I still think this is a team that knows that they need to put up some style points. They need to erase all doubt. If games fall the right way, you don't know. There's no way they're going to move up to 1. But, you want to go in on a high. I don't think Northwestern's going to be able to do much on offense whatsoever, and I think that you're going to see an Ohio State team that's going to be dialed in for at least 3 of the 4 quarters, more so than the 2 that we've seen most of the way through the year. I liked past tense, liked Ohio State to win this one big, 52-10.
Ooh, wow. I'll jump in then. I do think there's going to be a feeling out period in the first quarter. Could be like 7-7, 7-3, something like that. But I think what we see in these big type games, Ohio State's great at the end of the first half, managing the clock, punching one end, and then they'll punch it in too soon with 2 minutes to go, force a punt, and then punch another one in or get a field goal at the buzzer or something. A lot of times they lead the world in getting 7 to 10 points in the last 3 minutes of a half, and then also getting the football to start the second half because they usually win the toss and defer. Well, they don't usually win the toss. Hell, who knows? Probably 50-50. At any rate, they get the ball to start the second half, and that's the one where they put the game away. They drive 75 yards, 8 plays, and that's that typically. And I think it's going to be that kind of game where they just gradually pull away. The cream rises to the top. You can't keep a good man down. And Justin Fields, this is his backyard. This is his playground. Perfect, optimum playing conditions, fast track. They're going to make big plays, either running the ball or throwing it. I know it may not look pretty for the first quarter and a half or 2 quarters or whatever, but I have 41-17. I think Ohio State pulls away. We saw 45-24 in this game 2 years ago, and I think it was 24-7 at halftime, something like that. They hit the McLaurin bomb, I think, right before halftime, and that was the one where you took the pin and you just popped Northwestern's bubble because it was all over but the shouting at that point. And so unfortunate there won't be the usual crowd of 47,000 Ohio State fans there to watch the Buckeyes' 4th coronation in a row as a Big Ten champion. Nobody's ever won 4 outright Big Ten championships in a row, back in the standings era. Now we're in the championship game era where there's only one champion anyway at the end of every season. So Ohio State making history as they go along. And as we said, with these recruiting gains that they've made, they're going to continue to make a lot more history in the years to come.
What's sad about this is the Colts, their last 2 home games have had about 12,500 fans in attendance.
Why can't they do that?
And the Big Ten is like, no, let's just do families. Let's make it a quaint, nice, just families. Like this thing is taking place up in a cabin in the woods or something, up in the mountains first, just a nice ski trip with the family. So yes, just family in attendance there. I like the Buckeyes. I never think about the score until you start asking, Mark. Like, it's like, this is the first time you ever asked us a score, and it's the first time I've ever had to think about it. But I'll go 38-10. I don't think Northwestern's offense will do much against Ohio State's defense. And Northwestern will make Ohio State work for it a little bit. And so, it won't be supremely easy, but the Ohio State will still be able to complete passes. The running game has gotten going. Trey Sermon and Master Teague are both doing well. Justin Fields running the ball as well certainly helps that. So I think it'll be kind of out of hand. I don't know how early. I like the 28-point win. Ohio State should be able to do enough, whatever they want, and staying ahead of schedule, because Northwestern doesn't necessarily get you off schedule per se. They just want to try to make you fail on 3rd down. And Ohio State, they have so many 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 4 where they can do whatever. That's hard to stop. So I'll go 38-10, and it'll be good to see Ohio State kick a field goal for first time in a while.
I'd like to invite everybody over to sided.co. Sided.co. It's a debate site. Basically, you post a debate topic of the day. Our debate of the day is, which game do you want to see most? If you can only watch one game on Saturday, which one will it be? So join us on sided.co, and you can win a $25 gift card. So go to sided.co and vote right there, and you can win a $25 gift card. All right, Ohio State Northwestern coming off National Signing Day for a Big Ten championship and a likely college football playoff appearances. And is typically the case, we've got more people on here right this second than we have the entire hour at 196. So what you need to do is just jump off here. The video is going to post within 10 to 15 minutes. Watch what you missed. Coverage of National Signing Day and the matchup against the Northwestern Wildcats and Pat Fitzgerald's underrated, overlooked team that I wish was playing in some other conference so I could root for them to win, because I certainly would. All right, guys, we appreciate it. Steve Hellwagon down below me from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove there in the corner, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop. These guys are amazing. They bring the insight and the knowledge each and every week for us. Guys, have a great weekend. Enjoy the game.
All right.
Have a good one.